The screen door slammed so hard it rattled the jars on the shelf. Martha Clay's voice cracked through the heat. "Get in here, girl, now." Lydia hesitated on the porch, her eyes swollen from crying. The evening light cut across her round face, painting her skin gold and red like an ember that wouldn't die. Dustveil's church bells tolled in the distance, slow and accusing. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sweat and soap. Martha's hands trembled as she wrung a rag, staring at her daughter's belly. Soft, full, undeniable. "You think they won't see it?" she hissed. "You think a shawl hides sin?" Lydia didn't answer. Her fingers twisted the hem of her dress until the seam squealed. The boards beneath her feet creaked with every breath she took. From outside came the crunch of wagon wheels on gravel. A shadow passed the window, a horse team and a man larger than both animals together. The wagon slowed, dust curling up like smoke around him. Martha's eyes darted toward the sound. "He's here," she whispered. Lydia's lips parted. "Mama, please. Don't you mama me?" Martha snapped. "You brought ruin to this house." "To me." The door opened. The giant cowboy filled the frame. He had a duck beneath the lintel to step inside. The setting sun flared behind him, throwing his face in a shadow, save for a single glint in his eyes, steady, unreadable. He removed his hat slowly, the motion calm, deliberate. "Martha Clay," he said in a low, gravel-thick voice. "I come as agreed." Lydia stared. His shoulders were broad enough to block the room's light. His boots were coated in the road's dust, his coat patched from hard miles. On the floor behind him, a small wooden crate held a tethered cow, bony but alive. Martha forced a thin smile. "Yes, Mr. Boone." As agreed. The silence that followed was long enough to hear the clock ticking 3 rooms away. Lydia's breath came in short, panic bursts. The old woman's jaw trembled, but her hands were iron on her hips. "She can work," Martha said quickly, not looking at her daughter. "Strong back under all that flesh. She won't complain." Elias Boone's gaze drifted toward the girl. He said nothing for a long time. The air in the room shifted, hotter somehow, heavier. Lydia felt her heart hammering against the life inside her. Finally, he nodded once. "Reckon she'll earn her keep." Martha stepped forward, her face twitching between pride and shame. "Good, good. Then we're done." The girl's voice broke through the stillness. "Please, Mama, don't send me. I'll work here, Her mother's hand struck her cheek before the sentence could finish. The sound cracked like a whip. Lydia reeled back, tears springing instantly. Martha's chest heaved, her voice trembling with something deeper than anger, fear. "Don't you understand?" she said. "They'll burn us both if they know." The preacher's already asking questions. Outside, thunder rumbled, not from clouds but from the horizon, where the wind was dragging dust across the land like a burial shroud. Elias turned, his voice calm but final. "We should ride before night takes the trail." Lydia's sobs came soft now, breathless. "Please, sir, I don't want to go." The giant looked at her for a long time. There was no cruelty in his eyes, but there was no mercy either. Only a deep, quiet understanding, the kind that hurts worse than anger. He held out his hand. "Come on, miss." She shook her head, backing against the wall. Her mother grabbed her wrist and shoved her toward the door. "Go!" Martha shouted. "You made your bed. Now you lie in it." The floorboards thudded beneath Lydia's steps as she stumbled toward the threshold. The light outside was blinding, sun sinking behind the ridges, the world bleeding red. Elias helped her up into the wagon. His hand was warm, rough, and surprisingly gentle. He didn't look at her. He looked at the horizon. Martha stood on the porch, arms folded tight, her dress snapping in the wind. "You take her far, Mr. Boone. Don't bring her back." He tipped his hat once. Far enough. The reins snapped. The wagon groaned forward. Lydia turned, her eyes searching her mother's face, but Martha wouldn't meet them. The road wound through a dying field, grass yellow as old bone. The town faded behind them, church bell tolling one last time, as if sealing a coffin. For miles, they rode in silence. The only sound was the squeak of the axle and the rhythmic clop of hooves. The air smelled of dust and iron. Lydia sat stiff, clutching the fabric of her skirt as if it could hold her together. She dared a glance at the man beside her. His jaw was square, his beard gray around the edges. A scar cut across his neck like a faint rope burn. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, unreadable. She whispered, almost to herself, "Why'd you buy me?" His reply came after a long pause. "Didn't buy you. Just made a trade." The words hung between them, strange and cold. The wagon climbed a ridge. From the top, she looked back one last time. Dustveil was a smudge on the horizon, swallowed by heat waves. She thought she saw her mother still standing on the porch, small and rigid, but it might have been a fence post. Elias stopped the wagon to water the horse. The cow lowed softly, tugging its rope. Lydia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, glancing at the animal. "That cow worth me?" she asked bitterly. He didn't answer, just checked the harness, eyes squinting into the wind. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Ain't about worth." Lydia looked down at her hands, blistered, trembling. The baby inside her shifted, and she pressed her palm over it. A lump rose in her throat. As they descended the ridge, the sun sank behind the mesa, turning the land to fire and shadow. Crickets started their song, lonely and high. Elias spoke, almost like a prayer. "You'll be safe at my place." Got food. Got quiet. She wanted to ask why. Why a man like him would offer safety to a girl everyone else had thrown away. But the words died in her chest. The wagon wheels bit into the dirt, trailing 2 long lines through the dust. Behind them, the wind rose, carrying the faint sound of a bell and maybe the ghost of a woman's weeping. The storyteller's voice, low and tired, drifts in like the wind itself. The gate screamed as it swung open. Elias Boone led the horse through, the wagon creaking behind him. The land beyond looked endless. Miles of pale dust, broken fences, and a sky so wide it felt cruel. Lydia sat hunched in the wagon, one arm wrapped around her middle. The wind had teeth here. It pulled at her hair and filled her mouth with grit. The cow bawled behind them, a lonely sound swallowed by the cliffs. Elias stopped the team in front of a weather-beaten ranch house. The porch sagged like an old man's shoulders. Every board looked tired. He tied the reins and turned toward her. "You can sleep inside," he said. "Barns for the beasts." She didn't move. Her eyes darted across the empty yard. The trough, the broken wheel, the graves near the fence line marked with nothing but stones. A chill crept up her arms despite the heat. "You gonna sit there forever?" he asked. Lydia's legs felt heavy as she climbed down. The dirt burned through her shoes. When her feet touched the ground, she looked up at him. So tall he blocked the sun. His shadow stretched over her like a second night. Inside, the house was dim and cool. Dust motes floated in narrow beams of light. A single chair, a small table, 2 plates set out but unused. She saw it all in silence. He pointed to a cot in the corner. "That'll do." She nodded, her throat too dry to answer. He stepped outside, and the door shut behind him with a hollow thud. Lydia stood alone, listening to the wind scrape across the windows. By sundown, she found him in the barn, feeding the cow she came with. The light from the lantern cut his face into planes, jaw, cheek, the deep line near his mouth. He looked carved from stone. "I can't help," she said quietly. He handed her a bucket without looking up. "Then do." They worked in silence. The cow's breath steamed in the cooling air. She spilled water twice, hands shaking, but he said nothing, just took the bucket and refilled it. When the job was done, she sank onto a hay bale, sweating and ashamed. "I ain't worth much," she murmured. He leaned on the stall door, eyes steady. "You breathe, don't you? That's worth something." She looked away, her cheeks hot. He didn't press the matter, just hung the lantern on a nail and left her with the fading light. Days passed like that. She woke before dawn to milk the cow, to sweep the porch, to cook what little there was. He worked the fences, mended the roof, spoke few words. Sometimes she caught him staring toward the graves by the fence. Once, in the half-light of morning, she heard him whisper a name, Clara. The sound was soft, but the pain inside it ran deep. That night, Lydia lay awake on her cot, the wind pushing against the walls like a tired ghost. She thought about Dustveil, about her mother, about the baby that fluttered now and then beneath her ribs. The tears came without sound. One morning, a storm rolled in from the desert. The sky turned black as coal, and lightning cracked across the mesa. Lydia ran outside, skirts whipping around her legs. "Mr. Boone," she shouted. "The fence." Elias was already there, driving a post into the mud, his arms slick with rain. The wind screamed through the wire. The cow bellowed in fear, and Lydia ran to calm it, slipping in the wet earth. He caught her arm before she fell. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, his cold gray, hers wide and bright with panic. "You'll get yourself killed," he growled. "I was trying to help. I don't need help." "Then why bring me here?" she snapped, tears mixing with rain. The thunder swallowed his answer, but she saw his mouth tighten. Then he let her go, turned back to the fence, and drove the post in hard enough to split it. When the storm finally passed, they stood dripping under the eaves. She wrapped her arms around herself. "You ain't cruel," she said softly. "Just empty." He looked at her, rain still dripping from his hat brim. His voice came low. "Emptiness is quieter than sorrow." Then he walked inside, leaving her with the wind. Weeks later, the first bloom of morning light painted the mesa gold. Lydia knelt in the small garden she'd started near the porch, her fingers deep in the soil. She felt the baby shift again, a reminder of what she carried, what no one else wanted. Elias came from the barn, limping slightly, his sleeve torn. "Fence held," he said. She smiled faintly. "Good." He hesitated, then added, "You did right that storm." She blinked at him. "You yelled at me." He shrugged. "Still right." For the first time, she laughed, a small, shy sound. It startled them both. That night, Lydia woke to the sound of a man's voice outside. She crept to the window. Elias was kneeling by the graves, hat in hand, head bowed. His words drifted through the still air. "Clara, if you can hear me, I done wrong before, but I won't again. She stays. She needs this place more than I do." Lydia stepped back into the dark, her hand over her mouth. The wind carried the last of his words away, scattering them over the mesa like prayer dust. Morning came, pale and quiet. She found him at the table, coffee steaming, eyes on the horizon. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "Town's talking," he said. "Sheriff come a scan about you. Preacher too." Her stomach tightened. "They want me back. They want to make a lesson." She lowered herself into a chair. "What do you do?" He finally looked at her, gaze steady. "Same thing I did when I bury my kin. Stand my ground." The words hung heavy between them. Outside, the sun rose sharp over the cliffs. The air shimmered, thick with heat and the sound of cicadas. Lydia watched the horizon and felt something shift in her chest. Fear mixing with something fiercer, something she didn't have a name for yet. Elias finished his coffee, set the cup down slow. "You'll stay inside if they come." She met his eyes. "No, sir. I won't hide again." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once, approval, or maybe resignation. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard. The grave stood still and silent. The storyteller's voice drifts in, worn and low. The dog barked first, sharp, frantic. Then came the sound of hooves. 3 riders, silhouettes against the white blaze of noon, kicked up dust as they tore across the flats toward Bone Mesa. Elias Boone stepped out of the barn, hand resting near the hammer of his rifle. Lydia stood on the porch, a cloth frozen halfway across the table she'd been wiping. The baby inside her stirred, as if it too sensed the air tighten. The riders slowed at the fence. The one in front, broad hat, silver badge, raised a hand. Sheriff Tilson. The other 2 were churchmen, black coats and sweat-slick collars, rifles slung low. "Boone," Tilson shouted. "You best come out where a man can see you." Elias didn't move. The sun threw hard shadows across his face, turning his eyes into cold steel. "You're looking at me, Sheriff." Tilson's horse snorted, stamping the dry ground. "We got word you're holding a woman here. Town property, so to speak." His gaze shifted toward Lydia. "That her?" Lydia flinched, gripping the rail. Elias's voice stayed level. "Ain't no property on my land." The preacher spat dust. "That woman carries sin, Boone. You hiding her makes you a part of it." Elias's jaw flexed. He said nothing. The wind hissed through the grass, hot and brittle. Tilson leaned forward in his saddle. You got two ways this goes. Hand her over quiet, or we take her loud. Lydia's breath came shallow. Her hand went to her belly. Elias saw the tremor in her shoulders, and something inside him shifted, like an old door creaking open after years of silence. He stepped forward one pace. She's under my roof. My say. Tilson smirked. Your say don't stretch past that fence. The sheriff dismounted, slow and deliberate, spurs clinking. He unholstered his revolver and twirled it once. Funny thing about fences, Boone, they don't stop bullets. The moment hung, sharp and thin as glass. Elias's hand slid to the rifle. You best not test that. The preacher raised his gun first, nervous, twitching. The sound cracked like thunder. The shot hit the porch rail, splintering wood inches from Lydia's hand. She gasped, ducking low. Elias fired once. The preacher's rifle flew from his grip, spinning into the dirt. Tilson cursed and fired back. The air filled with gun smoke, hot metal, and the smell of fear. Horses screamed. The second churchman bolted behind a trough. Tilson took cover near a wagon wheel, shouting, You're harboring filth, Boone. You'll die with her. Elias didn't answer. He moved slow, deliberate, reloading between heartbeats. Each step he took forward made the ground tremble. Lydia crawled toward the door, blood on her arm where a splinter had cut deep. Elias, she cried. He turned, saw her crouched there, pale and shaking, and the sight hit him harder than any bullet. He shouted, Stay down. But she didn't. She stood. A shot cracked. Lydia's scream ripped through the heat. She fell to her knees, clutching her shoulder, blood blooming through the fabric like a red flower. Something broke then, clean, final. Elias's rifle hit the ground. His eyes went hollow. He stepped into the open, unarmed, the world going silent around him. Tilson blinked, raising his gun again. Don't you move. Elias did. He moved like a storm. He caught the sheriff's wrist mid-aim, twisting until bone popped. The gun fired into the dirt. Elias's other hand slammed the man's jaw, sending him sprawling. The preacher scrambled for his dropped weapon. Elias kicked it aside, grabbed the man by the coat, and threw him against the wagon so hard the board cracked. The second rider tried to mount up, but Elias reached him in two strides, yanking him down by the collar. Fist met flesh again and again until the man stopped moving. The dust swirled red with blood and sand. Tilson staggered up, clutching his broken wrist. You're a damned animal. Elias's chest heaved. No, Sheriff. Just a man tired of watching good folks suffer. Tilson raised his gun left-handed, shaking. Lydia cried out, Elias. He turned at her voice. The sheriff fired. The bullet struck Elias high in the chest. The sound wasn't loud. It was dull, heavy, like a hammer hitting wet clay. He stumbled, but didn't fall. He crossed the distance between them in 4 steps, grabbed Tilson's coat, and lifted him clean off the ground. The sheriff's eyes went wide with terror. Elias spoke through gritted teeth, blood dark on his shirt. You brought the law to my land. Now leave it here. He slammed Tilson into the fence post. Wood split. The badge snapped from the man's chest and fell into the dirt. Then slowly Elias let go. The sheriff slid down, gasping. The giant turned toward the porch. Lydia was there, clutching the post, tears mixing with blood on her face. He took a step toward her, then another, and sank to his knees halfway across the yard. She ran to him, falling beside him in the dust. Don't you leave me. He tried to smile, breath rattling. Ain't going far. Her hands pressed against his wound, desperate. Please, Elias. He lifted one heavy hand and rested it on hers. His eyes found hers, steady, calm. You ain't shame, girl, he whispered. Your life. The words hung there, trembling in the dry wind. Then his eyes softened, the breath left him, and the world went quiet. The preacher's horses bolted down the road, their riders too broken to follow. Sheriff Tilson crawled into the dust, leaving a trail of blood as he vanished toward the horizon. The sun bled into the mesa, low and merciless. Lydia sat beside Elias until the light turned gray. The wind picked up, dragging smoke and silence through the yard. When she finally stood, she walked to the graves by the fence and began to dig. Each shovel of dirt fell heavy, slow. The wind caught her hair and her tears, and neither one stopped falling. By the time the stars came out, there were 2 fresh mounds under the fence line. One marked Clara Boone, the other Elias. Lydia sat between them, her hand on her belly, the child inside still and waiting. The storyteller's voice drifts through the dark, low as thunder far away. The shovel struck stone. Lydia wiped her brow with the back of her hand, the desert heat burning down from above. Years had passed, but the earth still felt heavy, as if it remembered what it had swallowed. She dug in silence beside the fence, clearing weeds from the graves. 2 names, 2 lives. The same wind that once howled over gunfire now whispered through dry grass. Behind her, a boy's voice called, "Mama." She turned. A young man stood near the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, hat tipped back on his head. His hands were rough, his face open and calm. In his right hand, he held a hammer. In his left, a plank of new wood. "I fixed the trough," he said. "Water runs clean again." Lydia smiled faintly. The boy, no, the man now, was Elias's mirror. Same eyes, same quiet strength. "Good," she said. "The cattle will thank you." He looked toward the horizon. Riders again. 2 of them, coming slow. Her smile faded. She set down the shovel. "You go inside?" He shook his head. "I'm not hiding, Mama." The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint echo of hooves. Lydia's heart tightened. She brushed dirt from her hands, stood tall, and faced the road. 2 horses crested the ridge, carrying men in travel-worn coats. One bore a rifle across his saddle. The other, a folded paper, a wanted notice fluttering like a dying bird. They pulled up at the gate. The man with the paper squinted toward her. "You Lydia Clay?" "I am." He glanced toward the house, then at the boy behind her. "We've been sent from Dustveil, what's left of it." Sheriff Tilson's body turned up in the canyon. Folks talking again. Some say the one who killed him was a monster. Others say it was a man. Lydia's eyes hardened. Sheriff Tilson died of what he carried inside him. Nothing more. The men looked uneasy. The one with the rifle spat dust. "Preacher's sons are looking for the place they say their fathers fell. You best be careful who you tell your stories to." Lydia's jaw tightened. "Ain't my story that's dangerous," she said quietly. "It's the truth." The man studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. "Then you know how to keep it safe." They turned their horses and rode off, vanishing into the heat. When the sound of hooves faded, Lydia let out a long breath. Her son came to her side. "They still don't understand, do they?" She looked up at the sky. "They never will." That night, the desert glowed under a cold moon. The wind carried the smell of sage and rain, though no clouds hung overhead. Lydia sat on the porch, a lantern flickering beside her. Her son, Eli, sat on the steps sharpening a knife, quiet as his father once was. "Tell it again," he said suddenly. "About him." She looked at him, one brow raised. "You know every word. Then let me hear it from you." The lantern's flame danced. Her voice came low, soft as the wind brushing through dry grass. He wasn't no giant to fear. Folks called him that 'cause they couldn't see the truth. He was a man who'd lost everything, and when he found someone else the world wanted to throw away, he stood between her and the fire. That's all. Eli nodded slowly, the knife blade catching the light. "Did you love him?" Lydia's gaze drifted toward the graves. "He gave me back my name. That's a kind of love most folks never get." The night stretched quiet after that. Only the coyotes sang, soft, mournful, as though joining her in remembrance. At dawn, Lydia woke to the sound of hammering. She stepped outside and saw Eli standing by the graves, shirtless in the rising light, driving 2 new crosses into the ground. The wood gleamed fresh and raw. He carved names into each with the tip of his knife. Clara Boone, Elias Boone. When he finished, he stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "The old ones were rotted clean through," he said. Lydia's eyes glistened. "They'd like these better." He turned to her, hesitant. "You ever think of leaving? Starting somewhere else?" She shook her head. "No. The land remembers us. That's more than most can say. He nodded, understanding. The wind stirred, carrying the faint hum of bees and the creak of old wood. By midday, travelers stopped at the well out front. A husband, a wife, 2 children. Their wagon leaned from the road, wheels caked in dust. The man called out, "Ma'am, you got water for trade?" Lydia nodded, handed him a dipper. The woman, tired and thin, looked around. "What is this place?" "Bone Mesa Ranch," Lydia said. The woman's eyes widened. "I've heard stories. They say a giant died here, that he fought off the devil's men to save a girl no one wanted." Lydia's lips curved. Stories get the shape right, even if the bones change. The woman smiled softly, taking the water. "Then may the land bless you, ma'am." "Sounds like it already has." As the wagon rolled on, the storyteller's voice, old, cracked, full of the desert's breath, seems to rise from nowhere. And that's how the tale kept riding, passed from throat to throat, until nobody rightly knew what was true. But truth don't mind a little dust. It shines just the same given time. Years slipped by like shadows under the mesa. The old house leaned more each season. Lydia's hair turned silver, her hands lined like the dry riverbeds behind the barn. Still, she tended the graves. Still, she whispered his name when the wind rose. When she finally lay down for the last time, Eli buried her beside the others, 3 stones in a row under a sky too wide for sorrow. He stood there long after sundown, hat over his heart, the land gone silent around him. Then he spoke, quiet, certain. "She weren't shame," he said. "She was the reason this place still breathes." And so the years rolled on. Travelers crossing the mesa still tell the story of the giant of Dustveil, how he bought a woman for a cow, but bought his own redemption in the bargain. They say if you ride past the Bone Mesa at dusk, you can see a figure in the distance, broad shoulders, hat low, walking the fence line under the dying sun. Some claim it's just wind stirring the sand. Others swear the earth itself remembers. The storyteller's voice returns one last time, rough with smoke and memory.